Hey, it's Meg, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is a craft with me. I wanted to make these faux washi strips using tracing paper and vellum. Now this is a fun project that I saw a couple of years ago. Rachel from Roxy Creations originally shared a video making them, and they're super fun to just kind of make a batch of all at once. And I mentioned this in a previous video and a few of you guys said you wanted to see the process of making some of these, so that's what I'm going to do in today's video. And if you want to follow along, you'll need either tracing paper or vellum, some scrap papers, some stamp and ink, pens and markers, and any other like collagey bits really that you want to include on your washi strips. Obviously I've gone for a much more neutral floral kind of pattern, but by all means pick anything that you would like to use on these strips. So I hope you enjoy making these with me. They're super fun to make in bulk, like I said, and you can obviously tear them up and then use them just within your journal pages. And if you're taking part in Junk Journal January next month, I thought this might be a really fun project to make ahead of time that you can use within your journal pages. I know I'm definitely going to be looking forward to using them within my collages. So let's get started. So as I said, the first thing that you'll need is tracing paper or vellum. So obviously tracing paper is on the thinner side, and I found when making these, because the previous time I had just used vellum, so vellum you do get a bit more structure to your finished tape. However, I think the tracing paper kind of allows you to build up a little bit more thickness because it's not as heavy, and it does warp a little bit, but I don't think that's anything that can't be fixed by simply laying it under a heavy book overnight. So whether it's tracing paper or vellum, it's totally up to you. I was also thinking that it might even be fun to use sort of brown recycled paper, and you could create a more rustic version of this too. So the base layer is really anything that you want to use. You could even use just regular like scraps of paper, like strips of paper. It doesn't have to be something translucent. I think that just kind of adds a little bit of interest when it comes to collaging onto your pages when you use them, because you can kind of see different things peeking through. But all I did was cut them into strips of a couple of centimeters. I was kind of eyeballing it. You can totally do this however thick you want them to be. I sort of went for something that wasn't like really thin, but not too wide, so that allowed me to use my collage papers on it. So what I did first as I was making a batch is I went in with a base layer first. So I picked all my papers that were plainer and more neutral, and I was basically treating this the same way that I would treat any collage, and I was building my background first, my base layer. So I was simply going through, and you can see here just adding it. Now you can add it to the edge, to a corner, to the middle. I just sort of went in randomly and just sort of disperse them over the strip, so you don't have to be too precise. I think that's what I quite like about this, especially because it ends up being a bit of a mini mixed media piece almost, is that it really doesn't matter. And because when I come to use these anyway, I'm not going to use the whole strip in its entirety. I'm simply going to tear it and use certain sections. So it's really fun to kind of build up a whole pattern throughout the strip, and then see when you tear it then the parts that you end up with. So I would think about maybe just spacing things evenly. That's what I was trying to do when I was working on these. So you can see I'm just adding them here in corners, and I found that adding some of the papers on the edges, especially on the tracing paper, just helped to give it a little bit more stability as well, I was finding when I was collaging them. And don't worry if they're going warped like mine are. You can see there, I think it's just the glue on the tracing paper, and you can totally just flatten them out once you're finished with them. So don't worry about them being all wiggly for now. I was getting a little bit worried, I must say, when I was doing it first, because like I said, I'd only done it on the vellum before, so I wasn't expecting quite so much wobbliness on the strips. So I'm just going in and adding these neutral bits. Like I said, it's just offcuts of old book pages and also some tea-dyed paper as well, I think I pulled out. So I ended up just doing 6 of these, and I think the beauty about these is when you do multiple strips at once, you really get cohesion between all of the patterns. So there's similarities in like the colours and the mark making and the patterns on them, so it's almost a little bit like you're building more of a roll of it almost, but it's just a bit more portable because it's like a flat collage piece that you can use. And I just think it's really fun as a pre-made element that you can use in your journaling. So I'm definitely going to be adding this to my like junk journal kit that I've made for the challenge next month, which if you haven't seen that video of me putting that together, I go through all of my kind of like journaling essentials supplies and having them all in one place ready for the challenge, because I find it makes it easier to create. But if you haven't seen that video, I will leave a link down below if you want to check it out, maybe get some ideas of things that you might want to use for the challenge if you're taking part. So it's funny as well, I was starting to build up my neutral background here, and I decided to just use pieces that had book text on it, which I guess is still more of a background piece, but it was a way of starting to add little tiny background details to the page. And I was just trimming there where I had some excess of the papers, just to keep the strips nice and neat all the way round. Now I wanted to use some stamps on this page, some like old vintage stamps, but the colours I was finding were a bit too bright, which is kind of a bit of a theme because I do have a collection of these stamps that I like to use in my journaling, and I tend to gravitate towards the ones that, you know, they're a bit more muted, maybe they've got more earthy tones. And then there's a lot of blues and reds that I don't really like to use too much in my collages. They're not really my colour palette. So what I decided to do was turn the stamps around and glue them face down so that I had the backs of them showing. So it kind of gave that detail of the perforated edge kind of look that they have. And on some of them as well, because the way that they've gone through the postal system where they get like stamped, you can see that through really faintly on some of the stamps. As you can see on the one that is second from the right there, you can see the postal mark. And I just think that's such a really neat effect to have as a bit of a background element, really adds some nice interest to these strips. And what I was doing as well is if the stamp was too large, I didn't necessarily want it to take up the entire width of the strip, then I just used half of it, chopped it up, and then glued the other half of the stamp further down, so as to not waste the rest of the stamp. And I was just really pleased with the detailed effect that this gave, a little bit of vintage charm to these strips. And I think as well, working this way with the translucency really gives you some cool effects, because you could also, you know, flip the tracing paper onto the reverse and get a completely different pattern to work with. But what I'm going to do in a minute is add my mark making just onto one side. One thing I was actually thinking about as I finished up these strips was that, because I was kind of thinking they feel like they're missing a little something, but I'm not sure what. And I'm wondering whether to experiment with adding some stitched elements to these. Now I know that obviously making the holes in the tracing paper and the vellum, you've got to be careful obviously not to just completely like rip the whole thing. But I was just thinking maybe some like basic stitches up one side or something would be a really nice detail, especially if it was to be used, say, on the edge of a journal page. I'm thinking it might be a really nice way to add some texture, or it could even be a way that you add the washi like to your page as well. You could like stitch it on. See, look, just as I'm talking, I always have so many ideas. And I feel like sometimes when I do these voiceovers, I have a tendency to just ramble on about random things just as they come to my mind. But I've been trying to do a few more like longer voiceovers because I wanted to kind of share a bit more of kind of my thought process of these different things. And look, you guys are nearly 10 minutes into the video, so I feel like at this point, if you've stuck with me for 10 minutes, then you are my people, and you're probably thinking, no, I really love to hear what you have to say, but I do always worry that I'm just waffling on, which is why I love if you guys ever have any like questions or things you want me to talk about, then please let me know, because I would love to be able to share things that you guys find useful as well, so that we kind of, you know, can hang out together, but I'm also sharing something that is useful for you guys, whether it's like, I don't know, like tips about things, or even just things I've been loving to use lately. Oh, this decoupage paper, I really loved using this on this project. So obviously when you glue this down, it has a little bit of translucency to it as well. So I was just finding it really fun to play with the different effects that can give, you know, like over the different papers, and the sort of, it's not quite see-through, but you do get like glimpses of bits and pieces because it's slightly thinner. I think that using like maybe tissue paper or napkins would also be a really fun way to make these. And if you're familiar with masterboards, I was thinking that you could also just create on a sheet of tracing paper or vellum, like just as a whole, and then cut it into strips as well. You don't necessarily have to work with the strips as they are, but I just find it a little bit easier because it helps you to kind of visualize what the finished piece will look like, and as well you can work with the edges. But of course it's not the only way that you could create this kind of effect of the faux washi tape. So I wanted to add a bit more contrast with this collage, and these book pages that are from a gardening book that is literally dated like 1915, and it's falling apart, so I don't feel bad about using it at all, but it's so beautifully aged. And I think as soon as I popped that onto these strips, the contrast really helped to bring it together a bit more. So I was just putting it on top of some brown paper here so I could really see what I was working with, and especially just because it was translucent, this helped me to just understand where I needed to put a little bit more of the darker collage pieces to bring everything together. Plus I also wanted to start doing some mark making, and I knew that it might get a little bit messy, so I just wanted to add that as a bit of a protection for my desk. So I'm just adding these in little like torn strips. I'm not being precise with these at all, and I'm just adding one to, I think, pretty much every single strip. So I didn't add like loads of it, but just adding a hint of it really helped. And now I'm doing some stamping, so this is the part where I find it really starts to come together. So I'm just using a couple of floral stamps here. I'm just putting the sepia ink onto the floral design itself, and then using that and just sort of stamping it in random places on the strips. So sometimes I stamped it where half was on one strip and half was on the other, just to get like an impression of bits of the pattern, but nothing again too precise. I wasn't worried about having like a clean crisp stamp or having like the whole image showing. I think part of the charm is to actually have those bits sort of peeking out of the edges and things like that. So you can see I'm just doing it in the corner there and just literally stamping until my stamp doesn't have any more ink left on it. And in the previous version of these that I made, I used a text block stamp, which I think gave a really cool effect. So there's loads of different background stamps you can use. I mean, you could even use stencils. I think the beauty of this is just how many different ways you can create this mixed media collage for the eclectic look that it gives. I just really love all of the torn edges and the little bits of detail throughout. So in terms of mark making now, because I wanted to add some more details, so I was really working my way from, you know, the larger bits, the scraps, down through to the detail work here. So I'm using a mix of different things. So first of all, I've got these Neo colors, which are my absolute favorites. I love to use these, and I just wanted to bring in some color to these. So I'm using this kind of peachy color, which is quite strong, but I think it really pops against the neutral tones that I've got on this page. So I'm just sort of doing some dots, some squiggles, really not trying to think too much about what I'm doing and just letting it kind of make some marks and squiggles on the strips themselves. And then I've also got a darker one here where I'm just adding a couple of like lines and different scribbles as well. And this just helps to add a bit of contrast with the different papers that I've got on there. So I was using it to kind of go over different elements as well, which helps to bring them together. And then finally I've got these paint markers. So this white pen, I think, is what like finishes off the entire thing. It really helps the strip to kind of pop in terms of the detail work that I've got on it. So I was just doing some like dots and squiggles and scribbles there to add some blocks of the white pen as well. But that was pretty much everything that I did for these faux washi strips. So as I said, I'm really looking forward to using them in future projects, definitely in my Junk Journal January journal. If you'd like to find out more about that, all the details, like I said, will be in the description box down below if you want to join us for a month of creativity and community fun. I'm really looking forward to it. So I hope you enjoyed watching me create these faux washi strips. As always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys!